What a way to start the week with Run Pure Sports, a 12-game NBA slate. I'm JT Hayes. Hope everybody had a lovely Sunday. Hope you all played CJ Stroud stacks, as we talked about on the live show, as I happened to write up in my Contrarian Contenders article this week. That was in the winner. Huge day by Big T, both there and in the showdown, and members as well. If you're new here, even if you're not new here, if you've been here before, then you know to hit the like button. Hit the subscribe button, and if you're tired of seeing those winning screenshots and not being a part of it, head on over to Run Pure Sports, code NBA15, and get in to start the week. It's a great time of year. We've got college football. The NFL is midseason. NBA just kicking off. We've got MMA. Just every sport, one price. Golf will be here before you know it. So go ahead, NBA 15% off. DC, want to say hello to you first. It's been, I don't know, a week and a half since I've seen you. I hope you've been doing well. And what do you got cooking for us on this Monday 12-game slate here? What do you think of this slate? It looks like a tough slate, at least from the outset, because we've got some injury news that we're waiting on. Some late day, midday questionables dropped that are pretty interesting. And it doesn't look like ownership is completely revealing people taking advantage of at least some of those spots. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. And yeah, the 12-game slate, I mean, always, outside of maybe the very first game of the season, you get a 12-game slate, you're going to have a ton of news that you're waiting on, a ton of things that can change throughout the night. Tonight's no different. There's a ton of big injury news that we'll have to adjust to. We have, already significant news. Jamal Murray out certainly changes things for the Nuggets. We'll talk about that game last. It's one that I'm really interested in tonight. And then, a lot of other good spots, and excited to dive into it. Real quick on football, of course, got to give a huge shout out to Big T for the monster day on Sunday. Not only the main slate, but then to back it up with the showdown shipper was really, really cool to see. He did jump on the Up to Lock show really in the last 10 minutes. He kind of came to that. Anyone that was watching, came to that CJ Stroud game stack. He called it as being the nuts. It all made sense to me. I wasn't really on it. I was trying to get a team in there last second to jump on that game. And, it's just obviously all the credit in the world to Big T. He's one of the best players in the world, one of the best tournament players in the world, no question about it. But it does outline, there are lessons you can learn from a huge win like that. The one to take away from that win, he only really had to be right about the one thing, right? The monster game overstack with Houston and Tampa Bay. His other players, Saquon Barkley, CeeDee Lamb, just kind of straight up, clearly the best plays on the slate. And it just shows you the power of correlation. When you can find a spot like that and hit on it, you can surpass thousands and thousands of lineups. It really just takes kind of the one big conviction play. And so, you absolutely love to see it. And, obviously not everybody got to that stack. There's a reason all those guys are 3 or 4% owned, but take inspiration from such a good play and continue searching, try to find those spots yourself. Just takes one big day. So it was really cool to see, and hopefully we can keep the winners going here at RPS.
That's all it takes in the NFL is one big day. And again, take advantage of what are you looking at in terms of game spots. You had a backup running back starting against a team that you can't run against, and the play was to overstack. I didn't overstack like the Millie winner did with 3 pass catchers. That was something I didn't see myself getting to. Bryce, want to bring you in. First of all, congratulations to you. A massive, just MLB playoff season for you. You start out, I think you shipped a couple of the showdown slates, the first night of NBA. It's been absolutely outstanding. Welcome. How was your weekend? And big slate here, 12 games. There's no games tomorrow night, Bryce, because everyone has to go out and vote on Election Day. I don't even know what we're voting for tomorrow, but that's important. And go ahead, you do it too as well, subscribers. And then they'll be back on Wednesday. But how have you been? How's your week going?
I'm good. Massive congrats to Big T. I managed to save my day, which was in the total shitter and cash due to the Falcons. I played Bijan and Kyle Pitts, but I swapped on to Dak and CD. So that ended up working out for me. I cashed everything by like the exact amount of the swap. So swaps are always a stressful weekend. I hate doing it, but
we gotta stop playing Bijan.
I'm done.
That's same with me. I'm out. I got to see it at this point with Bijan. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I told myself before the week I was totally off Tony Pollard, and I play him on FanDuel, of course, because he's like 6,500. I told myself I was totally off Bijan. I talked myself onto Bijan because I love my teams with him. And they proceed to run the backup and two Jonnu Smith jet sweep and then get stuffed again. Like when Jaron Hall turned that ball over and they had the ball on like the 1 yard line. All right. I'm like, all right, if Bijan doesn't get it done here, I'm done with this fucking guy. And that's just a shitty situation. But CD came up huge for me. He came up huge for Big T. I know Big T loves to pick on the Eagles secondary. So, it's good to, CD was still owned, but it wasn't like his ownership was like absurd to the point where you wouldn't play him or something. He's just been a monster this year too, especially recently. They can't run the ball. So, someone has to do it. But yeah, I thought the overstack was a super good play this week, actually. And I'm not usually a fan of overstacks, but with all the shitty totals that were on the board, you just need to find the one good game. Like an overstack works if the rest of the shady slate is shitty too. But if there's a ton of high scoring games, then an overstack won't work because there's other people who put up fantasy points, but literally no one else scored besides that one game. So you needed the overstack to win.
And if you'd watch CJ Stroud, I was on him after kind of week one, just watching one game of this guy. Is this guy can do it. He can drop dimes all over the field. You give him some protection. He had his wide receivers healthy. You could have played 4, right? You could have played the tight end and all 3 of his main wide receivers. Nico Collins, I think, was the worst player of the bunch, but even he had a solid game. So just a ridiculous game from Stroud. I did want to address this comment as well. He says, let's be real, though. You're not playing that Houston game in a crazy way unless you have 150 lineups. You're not playing that mess with 3 to 5. That's not true. Big T had 3 lineups in the Wildcat, right, where he won the big 100K. So
his 150 file wasn't even great compared to he made money on it, which is tough to do. He placed a ton of teams, but it's super hard to find that combo. It was all 3 max stuff.
So just that comment is just completely wrong because he did play it on one of the 3 and a crush. So I just
in the 3 max 150, CJ to Nico was one of mine. I ran it back with Mike Evans. So seeing him his ass literally hit the 1-inch line on that reception was pretty tilting there, because that would have been a much, much better day. We got some people in chat commenting Bijan was in the Millie. Yeah, that's actually true. P. Lally, is this a Brave shirt? This is the Los Bravos shirt. I'm wearing my Los Bravos shirt from Mexican Heritage Night, Hispanic Heritage Night, something like that this summer. And for everyone who's saying Pitts is dead, Kyle Pitts is dead, I'll take the L. He was my play of the day. I thought, look, he's got to be the wide receiver 1 here. But I was tempted by Jonnu Smith, and of course it ended up being Jonnu Smith. But everyone who's saying Bijan's dead, I'm not playing the Falcons, fuck Arthur Smith. Good news, the Arizona Cardinals are up on the Falcons schedule next. So as much as you want to say the Falcons are dead, you are going to have to consider them.
I won't. No.
See what happens next week when Bijan goes for 38. So, all right. Now, all that being said, hit the like button. I haven't looked in a minute. Next time I look, I hope we're at 300 and I don't have to say it again. We're going to get into this 12-game slate. Not a lot, but I guess a fair amount of injury news, kind of some interesting spots with players making their debuts. We'll start in Philadelphia. The Wizards in Philadelphia, 229 total. Philly favored by 11 here. Bryce. Nicholas Batum is going to make his debut for the Sixers for whatever that's worth. The Washington Wizards, Denny Avdia, Daniel Gifford, and Corey Kispert, they all participated in shoot-around. It looks like it'll be a full crappy rotation for the Wizards here in this game. Anything you like with this 229 total?
Yeah. You can always play guys against the Wizards. It's not like the absolute best spot on the slate by any means, and I think ownership will be reflective of that. Guy that stands out to me for the Wizards is Kyle Kuzma here. He's super cheap on FanDuel. He's like 7,700. I think that's just kind of a long-term buy at that price. And you've seen him pretty cheap all season. On DraftKings, we've been playing Kelly Oubre recently, and he's been solid, not spectacular, but I think you can go back to the well here, even with Batum in, depending on who starts. The slate's a little tough now without starters and without some of this injury info, because once we get to some of these later games, like the Dallas situation, a ton of stuff can open up there. So if you end up getting some more value, Embiid becomes a better play. I think that Jokic is going to go way higher owned than Embiid here. So I like him as a leverage play.
Yeah, Jokic, an upgrade midday DC up to question how probable he is now, as a matter of fact, just a few moments ago. What do you see here in the first game of the night? Looks like Embiid probably going to be, at least of the Sixers, the most popular of them. Bryce, you mentioned Kelly Oubre. Now the price up to $6K, in an 11-point spread. DC, is there enough upside on anyone in the Sixers outside of Embiid?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Washington, they're going to continue to give it up all year long, right? If you just look at if you look at the numbers overall, teams that are efficient, giving up threes, you try to dive in. There's a lot of noise, and what are we at, like 6 or 7 games of NBA? So you got to use some common sense when you're looking at those numbers. But if you use the common sense along with the numbers for Washington, it's like, of course this team can't defend. You know what I mean? They're giving 35, 40 minutes to Jordan Poole, Kyle Kuzma. I mean, Tyus Jones, a good player, but not really an NBA level caliber athlete. You know what I'm saying? He's small and just can't. What I'm trying to get is he can't run with Tyrese Maxey. I think Maxey is going to be a little bit of a matchup dependent play throughout the year. But I think in these pace up games where there's no defense, I think he's going to absolutely torch this Washington team. I think that's going to be a common theme with him. Kelly Oubre, I mean, this is a perfect spot for him too, right? He can get out and run. He's a scorer, blocks, steals. He contributes a little bit there. And then, of course, Embiid can kind of do whatever he wants on the interior here. But it's Tyrese Maxey that's my favorite play. 36 minutes in that last game, and they pulled him with 3 or 4 minutes to go due to the blowout, the big lead. He's going to be an upper 30s minutes per game player on this team. I think it's him and Embiid's team. I've been saying that. And then I think it's Oubre and Tobias Harris that are going to kind of round it out. After that, right, Melton, Covington, Batum, Korkmaz, all these guys, I think they're just kind of fighting for minutes to some degree coming off the bench. I think the Sixers are going to have kind of a big four that you can rely on from night to night, especially an amazing matchup like this. I think the minutes are going to be there, and I think they're going to be really productive when they're out there, right? So you kind of got both factors, and maybe relatively low ownership too. I think people are a little bit slow to buy in to that Maxey price tag. I think he's worth every penny of that 8,300 tag. I expect 40 plus out of him. I think the floor and ceiling are there. I think he's a really, really strong play tonight.
All right. Tobias Harris been playing some good basketball as late too with this new rotation without James Harden. We move on. A game that Bryce mentioned, DC, Dallas at Orlando. Of course, you've got Luka questionable. You've got Kyrie questionable. Maxi Kleber is questionable. 222.5 total. Orlando favored by 4 for Orlando. No Markelle Fultz, no Gary Harris, who they still insist on playing big minutes, and Jonathan Isaac is questionable. Obviously, we get news that one or the other, or both, especially both of Luka, Kyrie being out, that brings into play Jaden Hardy, Josh Green, maybe Tim Hardaway Jr. What do you see here? Dallas is on a back-to-back tonight.
I mean, Luka and Kyrie, I think, are legitimately banged up, right? Luka was kind of hobbling after that last game. Kyrie has missed time. And there is a decent chance that they both sit out this game, which obviously, if that happens, that's by far the main story on the entire slate, right? Because at that point, I mean, it's just, it's kind of becomes how many Dallas guys can you fit in your lineup, especially at the guard positions. Yeah, I think Jaden Hardy would become almost a must play at that point if they both sat. Tim Hardaway, I think, would become an amazing play. We'll see what they do with Seth Curry. I'm not sure. Josh Green. I mean, all these guys. They're just, you take 70% usage off the team. And of course, some of these guys that are cheap are going to come into awesome play. So we'll see what Dallas does. I think there's a pretty good chance both sit. If so, I'm going to be loading up on that Dallas backcourt. Despite I mean, it is a pretty tough matchup, right? Orlando's been really, really good defensively. They don't play fast, but still, I think you just kind of have to buy in to the Dallas guards that are going to get all those minutes. In Orlando side, yeah, with Fultz out, with Gary Harris out, I think Cole Anthony, Jalen Suggs, and Franz Wagner all become interesting plays. And if you do get both of these stars out for Dallas, Luka and Kyrie, you also have, I think, a really good potential game stack here. If it does stay close, a lot of cheap pieces on both sides, you could potentially pair them up with a Embiid or Jokic or whoever you want to go for a stud. So very, very interesting game. And yeah, it's obviously starts at 7 Eastern time, so we will have the news in time to react appropriately. Obviously, we'll be in the Discord answering all the questions about this game. It's hard to answer them all without knowing who's playing, of course.
Bryce, if Luke is out, if Kyrie's out, you're looking at the obvious plays being Hardy and Green. It is a back-to-back for Dallas. It is Jason Kidd. And then on the other side with the Fultz injury, DC mentioned Suggs. You have Cole Anthony, although only 21 minutes against the Lakers the other night. A little bit of a random rotation there in Orlando amongst the guards, even with some of these guys out. Paolo Banchero, just 7,700. The Mavericks, with everybody in, have been giving up a ton of fantasy points. I can't imagine that they're going to find any way to slow these guys down tonight. What do you like in this game?
I mean, I'm going to assume for the purpose of the show that Kyrie and or Luka, one of them at least plays, because if not, I would play 150 Hardy teams. I'm actually going to the Pacers game, so I'm not see Wemby, so I'm not maxing tonight, but I would play 150 Hardy teams if I was. So just fire up the Mavs if those guys sit. It's a super interesting swap dynamic here, simply because you got 12 games and 11 of them are between 7 and 8. So you get that it's all like jammed into the early window. So you're going to have tons of news flying in, starting at like 5:30, 6 o'clock, and that'll be coming throughout the slate. The biggest stuff is the Mavericks here, and I don't really like Luka or Kyrie if both of them play. They would pretty much be fades to me. DC touched on it being a tough matchup, but if one or both sit, then makes the other one much more viable. And if both sit, then it's Hardaway. I would rank them Hardy, Green, Hardaway, and they're all pretty close, but Hardy's just too cheap. On the other side of the ball, Goga's too cheap. It's a great matchup for center, and I have a ton of interest in him on both sites. He's simply too cheap, and he's a great fantasy scorer. On the Orlando guards, Fultz is out, so I have some interest in Cole Anthony. I think Anthony Black is playable. He showed that he has somewhat of a minute ceiling. And, it's Dallas is not a bad matchup for him. So give me some of him today. And I think Jalen Suggs is more I think he's a solid play on each site. I don't think he's like an absolute must or anything. I prefer Anthony Black. I think he's one of the better values on this slate if the Dallas guys play. If the Dallas guys sit, then it's obviously Dallas.
All right. Hit the like button. We need to get an unknown number. DC is going to decide at about the middle of the show. We'll give him a little responsibility here today on this beautiful Monday night. And Trevor Bryan, congratulations. Saw that 20K hit yesterday on the main slate. We'll move on. Bryce, we'll stay with you because you're going to this game. San Antonio at Indianapolis. Indy favored by 9. 238.5 total. It is a back-to-back for San Antonio. We know how Greg Popovich manages minutes in the best of situations, but a back-to-back. Wemby, you mentioned, played 38 minutes last night. For the Spurs, it is Keldon Johnson who is questionable. Doug McDermott is going to play. Of course, Devin Vassell is still out. Wemby, that game may have been, because it says off injury. Maybe that was the other night they played 38 minutes. And then for Indiana, basically everyone healthy. What do you like here?
Well, the line kind of surprised me because Pop came out and said that they weren't going to rest any of these guys. And you see a 9.5 total spread here. To me, that kind of indicates that like Wemby would be sitting, but it looks like he's playing here. I do have concerns about all the Spurs minutes in this spot. I think that Vegas and the line makers do as well. 9.5 9.5 spread kind of stands out to me like, oh, something's up here. And, if no one's out, I think the minutes could get cut here. I think the best play on the Spurs, price adjusted, is probably Zach Collins. I think he should have to play a lot in this scenario, or in the spot. And, both teams just run nonstop. It's a really fun game environment, and I'm super excited to go. So I'm going to be firing up Halliburton in every format. I think he's one of the best spends on the slate. He's not that hard to fit. He is kind of expensive, but the Pacers have such a high team total here, and Halliburton's been clicking on all cylinders. 9,400 is not absurd for him. I think he drops 50 in the spot, so I really like him on the Pacers side of the ball, and I'll definitely have some game stacks out there.
All right, DC, we'll move over to you. Zach Collins, if you're thinking about this the way that we know that Popovich does things, Wemby being a rookie, you would expect that Collins would at least get 30 minutes. 30 minutes in this spot at his price is absolutely fantastic, has been for many centers against the Pacers. And then Miles Turner coming off a bit of a dud, very popular the other night against the Charlotte Hornets. He's expected to be popular again in what has been a good matchup, particularly if we're projecting for Wemby to play maybe 6 to 8 minutes less, that's 6 to 8 minutes less of that length on the court for Miles Turner. Still seems a little bit risky. What are your interests here in this one?
Yeah, I think Bryce kind of nailed a lot of it. Like the San Antonio minutes, even if, right now it looks like these guys are going to play, even if that does hold up, obviously there's some risk there on the second half of a back-to-back. Like coming into the year, I wasn't even sure if they would let Wemby play 38 minutes in a regulation. No, that was overtime, so that makes sense with the extra 5. Yeah. Would have been 33. But like even that, I kind of thought they might keep him in the high 20s or so. So just to see the possibility that his minutes can go that high, I think is encouraging for him going forward. And, prior to yesterday, they hadn't played in 4 days. It's still early in the season. They're off tomorrow. Like, if these guys are rolling again, it's a close game. I don't think it's a lock that Wemby doesn't get into the low to mid-30s. And, man, his upside, especially in a game like this, it's going to be back and forth, probably high scoring. It's just enormous, and I do think he's still kind of will be low owned. So I still like Wembanyama. I don't think I go crazy with the Spurs. If Keldon Johnson misses, obviously that's even more usage to go around. That would make my interest in this game and pretty much all the Spurs, but specifically Wembanyama even higher. And then, great spot for Halliburton. He's a threat to go off each and every night, especially in matchups like these. Miles Turner, I think, is fine. This is Bryce, if I'm going to this game, I know you are, I'm getting a game stack or two in for this one because this could absolutely, 115 overtime. You got 6-7 guys from this game. Could be a little CJ Stroud situation in the NBA for you. Root at home live wouldn't be bad. So I think this game is definitely a one to attack and hope. Obviously it could be a blowout. You could lose the minutes. Not a guarantee. So I do think this is a fun one to attack. Wembanyama, I think, maybe my favorite player on the Spurs. Halliburton on the other side.
Definitely a night with a lot of long rotations where you can see a lot of guys getting minutes, and maybe this is a spot with maybe more condensed, at least at some spots. Guys, Jason Gordon is in here. He's asking about Derek Lively on the Mavs. I don't love that play just in the scope of the slate with some of the other better center plays. Any of you guys, let's assume that one or the other of Luka or Kyrie sit. Any interest in Derek Lively in this matchup against the Orlando Magic?
As a tournament flyer, I think he's okay. Not my favorite play. I think center's super deep today is the thing. Like with Goga and then like some of the best spends, especially if you get this Mavericks value at guard, is going to be at center. So just due to positional scarcity, he's not a priority for me.
DC, he's just not the player that's really going to benefit from the absence of those guys, right? He's not a three-point shooter, doesn't really play on the perimeter at all. Hard to really even bump his minutes due to those guys being out. Just affects him way less than it does, obviously, the guards for the Mavs. So probably still wouldn't get to Lively even if both guys were out.
Yeah, it is a back-to-back. Centers on back-to-backs. I'm a little bit more concerned about, and I think there's 5 or 6 centers that I'm going to have a little bit of trouble deciding between that are ahead of Lively. So none for me here, but we'll move on. DC, we'll stick with you. The next game, another and the last of the games involving the back-to-backs. Golden State in Detroit. Warriors favored by 7. Both teams on a back-to-back. Over-under implied at 2, or over-under is 224.5. Alec Burks for Detroit is doubtful. Joe Harris is out. Monty Morris is out. Jaden Ivey is questionable on the Warriors side. If we trust Steve Kerr, the good thing is it's a 7 o'clock game. It looks like the only one who's questionable right now is Draymond Green. Interest here, the Warriors at the Pistons.
As it stands, and I kind of hope it stands, it stays this way. This is a game I'm probably going to pass on. Golden State been playing really slow, playing really good defense. Looks as of now that they're going to play all their guys back to back. I don't think they want to run their guys. Obviously, a veteran team, extended minutes. So the Warriors side would be a pretty easy fade. And I'm just not picking on the Warriors right now, given how slow they're playing and the defense that they're capable of playing as well. Looney in there is a really good defender. I think people, getting Gary Payton, a fantastic defender, Chris Paul. It's just not a team I really want to go up against, try to pick on. So pretty much off Detroit too. 12-game slate. Unless things change for the Warriors, I'll probably be passing on this one.
Bryce, we'd hope that with the coaching change, the Detroit rotation would condense a little, be a little bit easier. It really hasn't been that way, even with some of these guys out. Any interest here, the Warriors at the Pistons?
I think this is probably the worst spot to attack on the slate, in my opinion. I don't really want anything to do with the Warriors on a back-to-back. As DC said, if some of these guys sit and, it funnels minutes and production to the other players, then sure. But, we're projecting them all in as of now. On the Detroit side of the ball, the only spot I would like would be like a Cade Cunningham or Thompson. They're a little bit thin at guard and, could get even thinner approaching lock. So, rotations are kind of annoying, but, without the positional depth there, might be forced into huge minutes. I don't mind Cunningham or Thompson in this spot. The rest of the game, I'm going to be significantly under on.
All right, we'll move on. We'll stick with you. The next game, now we're into the 7:30 Eastern time block. The Clippers at the Knicks. James Harden is going to make his debut. And for the Knicks, RJ Barrett is questionable, Bryce. This seems like a situation in real life, real basketball, that's destined to blow up. But is there anything for DFS here that you could be excited about with a lot of high usage players, Harden on some type of minutes restriction, and Ty Lue still having a multitude of players at his disposal that he could just toss in the game at any moment?
I'm totally off the Clippers here. They're priced to play without James Harden, and now you're adding one of the highest usage players in the league to the team at possibly limited minutes. I think it's just a total avoid. You have 24 teams to attack tonight. I don't see any logic in going with the Clippers, even at low ownership. The Knicks, Brunson and Randall continue to be underpriced. Quickly's been a great play off the bench. I think this is really high energy spot for the Knicks at home against James Harden making his debut. Could see some extended minutes for these guys just based on that. So that gives me some interest in the Knicks. My favorite ones would be Randall, Brunson, Quickly in that order. If RJ Barrett sits again or sits, I think Josh Hart becomes a decent play. And he's only 5,300. So keep an eye on that with the injury news.
Brandon McNair is in chat. He says he's locking Sasser in 150, and I don't know why you wouldn't, B-Mac. From what we expect, actually, B-Mac's been on a roll lately, but Sasser in 150, I guess if you didn't have the value in Dallas, maybe you would consider playing some of him. I don't know about a lock, DC, but Bryce brings it up here. James Harden and Russell Westbrook, how many million fantasy points are the Clippers going to give up to opposing guards? And Jalen Brunson is just 8,400 tonight. Of course, Barrett, he doesn't really affect Brunson. That play would affect, I think, Quickly a little bit more. What are your thoughts here on the Clippers and the Knicks? Assuming that, like Bryce and myself, you're completely off the Clippers, what are your interests here from the Knicks side of things?
Yeah, as long as the big four Clippers stay healthy, it's going to be a while before I invest in those guys. I just don't think there's any chance that the current roster construction is going to work out. I'm with you, JT. Seems like a ticking time bomb to me, but maybe they can hold it together for one season. I kind of even doubt that, to be honest. DFS wise, though, I'm not on the Clippers tonight. Knicks are, I think more interesting. Brunson coming off that huge game. We were on him against Milwaukee, who's getting torched by guards. We'll talk about the Milwaukee game coming up here in a second. I think he could certainly go off. Not my favorite game overall. I do think Harden, too, is going to slow down the Clippers a lot. He's just not a guy who really pushes the pace much at this point of his career. So, I don't love the game environment here, but if Barrett does sit, Brunson quickly, I guess Randall, I think they're all okay plays, but I'm probably less excited about this game than most.
All right, we got some news here. Jaden Ivey has been ruled out. Speaking of Sasser, Jonathan Isaac also ruled out. Black will once again get the start for the Magic at the point guard position. Black, Suggs, Franz Wagner, Banchero, and Goga for these Magic against the Dallas Mavericks. DC, we'll stay with you. The Los Angeles Lakers at the Miami Heat. Miami favored by 222.5. Team total for the Lakers. No Rui Hachimura, no Jackson Hayes. Taurean Prince is going to play. Vanderbilt's still out. For the Miami Heat, who have gotten into this habit of having the longest injury report in professional sports, it looks like everyone is in or probable, with the exception of people who really don't matter all that much. I guess Caleb Martin out, remaining out is mattering. Jimmy Butler hasn't really looked all that interested in basketball recently, but he is 8,300. Tyler Herro is priced up. You've got Bam at 8K. These are DraftKings prices. And when the Lakers play, you want to get a guy or two from the opposing team because of how fast they play and how many fantasy points they give up. Are you interested in any of the Miami Heat tonight here in this matchup?
Only Miami guy I'm really looking at is Tyler Herro. We've been on him kind of from the beginning. I think it was AP that kind of talked me on to him early on in the season. Makes sense with Jimmy Butler. Looks like playing through injury and just kind of not giving a shit, frankly. It seems like a little bit here early on in the season. Butler has a little bit of a history of that, of just ramping up as the long season goes. And, man, it really does seem like they are leaning on the offense. I mean, it doesn't seem like it. They are leaning on the offense of Tyler Herro early on. I think that could continue, and I like the matchup against that Laker backcourt, right? It's D'Angelo Russell, Reeves, LeBron. Like, those guys, they're not putting in a ton of effort defensively. So I do think Tyler Herro could be in for another big game. And then on the Lakers side, I think it's Anthony Davis is the guy that I want for them most often right now, really playing out of his mind in the minutes too, more than we're used to seeing. Another one where we'll see how long he can continue playing 35, 36 minutes a game. But while he is, I think he's a really strong play. Not a great individual matchup, right, against the Heat and Bam Adebayo. But when Davis is playing at this level in big minutes and he's still under 10K, I do think you got to consider him there at 9,900. So he's my favorite play by a decent margin on the Lakers. Herro, Anthony Davis, the two guys I like best here.
All right, Bryce, Lakers, Heat. What are your thoughts on this game?
Don't want to sound like a broken record, but I agree with everything DC said here. While it's not an individual, great matchup for Anthony Davis, I mean, he's pretty much matchup proof. If he's getting the minutes, he's going to go out there and produce. 9,900 is too cheap for him. You get a significant discount off the other studs on the slate. Makes him one of my absolute favorite plays. We had talked about how deep center is today, and he's definitely one of them. I think he's probably my favorite price-adjusted stud today. 9,900 is simply too cheap for him. On the other Lakers, I don't mind Christian Wood. They're just super thin in the front court right now. He's 5,200. I wouldn't love playing him and Anthony Davis togetger.
I was going to ask, probably separate them, right? Like, for Wood to really go off, you're kind of hoping for Davis foul trouble or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm hand building, I would separate them. Like, if I'm running him in my 150, I wouldn't create a rule not to do it, simply because like super weird shit can happen in 150. But yeah, I mean, if you're playing the micro matchups here, I would not play them together. On the Miami side of the ball, I agree with Hero. All the Heat seem a little expensive to me here in this spot, but as we said, the Lakers are playing super fast. If I had to choose between one of the Heat big three, I would rank them Hero, Bam, Butler last. And I think it's a decent contrarian spot for Bam. I think he might have to play some minutes here going up against Anthony Davis, but he's not super cheap. Like, it's really hard not to just click on Anthony Davis for $1,500 more. And the field will be reflective of that, but give me Brown in this matchup all day.
All right, fair enough. We have Jacob Stubbs in the chat. Jacob, what's going on? Snyder was in here earlier. Snyder, I hope you're still with us. The Soldiers, Odell Beckham Jr. disgustingly once again gets in the end zone. Fantastic call during the Off the Chalk show yesterday morning. Hit the like button. 91 is where we were at a couple of minutes ago. Not nearly enough for 320 watching to get the plays of the day to start your week. Bryce, Milwaukee at Brooklyn. Milwaukee favored by 5, 233.5 total here. Cam Johnson remains out. Ben Simmons will be back, and Lonnie Walker is probable. DC talked about guards against the Milwaukee Bucks. It's something that we did for years against the Portland Trailblazers when Damian Lillard was there. Now, the question, of course, with Brooklyn, which one of these guards do you choose, if at all, in this spot against the Bucks tonight?
Cam Thomas for me. He's one of my absolute favorite plays on the slate. I think he's going to go super. He always goes two unowned. The dude shoots it 25 times a game. He's going to run into auxiliary stats here and there. It's a great matchup against Lillard. I really like this game tonight in general. I would rank it Cam Thomas, Bridges, Dinwiddie, then Simmons for me, with the big Nets players. And then, Giannis has not really gotten there this season at all. I don't think anyone's going to be on him in the spot. I don't think it's the worst contrarian stud spend. Especially if we get some of this Mavs value. I really like being a little spread out with studs, and that's my typical way to approach a slate. Play random studs and jam the good value. So I don't mind Giannis here. Lillard, I don't think he's the worst play at 9,200. I would prefer a spend on Giannis. I don't love either. They're just kind of hard to get to with what else you're trying to do slate. And if we get all this value at guard, it kind of prioritizes going a little bit cheaper at guard and spending more at big men.
All right, DC, Milwaukee, in Brooklyn. The one guy that I'm interested to hear your opinion on, Bryce didn't mention, Brook Lopez, 5,500. The Nets have been playing small. It's a spot where Brook Lopez could go absolutely nuts. The DraftKings price I'm referencing. Minutes have been a little bit all over the place, but it looks like they're more consistent when the game is close. What are your thoughts here? The Bucks at the Nets.
Yeah, I don't mind that Barolo call. I think he's one that's certainly a volatile play, right? You're not guaranteed to get the minutes. It's possible the Nets playing small. If the Nets come out hot and Brook Lopez can't, the Bucks can't keep up, possible he gets played off the court early. Also possible he completely dominates the weak interior.
Dorian Finney-Smith, Royce O'Neal. I
like that call. And I do think, I mention this often, I think the players like Brook Lopez, whose minutes are volatile, make for great GPP plays because their median projection doesn't look great, right? Because you got penciled in 26, 27 minutes, but then you get the game where they're going off and they're playing well, and the extra minutes are correlated with good production. And so all of a sudden you can have a really low on play that goes off. I can see something like that happening to Brook Lopez. I haven't really played Giannis or Lillard at all this year. And I'm going to kind of continue that while they're this high of priced. I mean, Giannis's high in the season is 50 fantasy points. It's not going to get it done at 10.6K on a huge slate. So I know he's going to be a contrarian play, but I just can't quite get there myself. I love the Cam Thomas call by Bryce. Heavy usage, and the way this Milwaukee Bucks defense is set up, they are spectacular at preventing rim shots, defending the rim, defending the paint, and they get murdered on the perimeter by three-point shooters and got guys who can score in the mid-range, right? Because they pack it in the paint. That's Cam Thomas to a T. He's a bucket. He's a guy who scores. I think Brooklyn needs him to do that, and he's certainly willing to step into the role and shoot it as many times as they need. So I love Thomas. I think Dinwiddie is the second guy I like. I actually think it's going to be Dinwiddie who draws the direct matchup with Damian Lillard. I think Dinwiddie had 14 potential assists in that last game. So he is the primary playmaker on this Nets team right now. That's what you want to be. I mean, that's what Jalen Brunson is, right? Kind of for this team. He's the closest thing to that. So, yeah, that Dinwiddie, Cam Thomas backcourt, I don't even mind playing them together, right? Because if the thesis is right that you can score on these guards, score from deep, score in the mid-range, Dinwiddie and Thomas can both do that. They can assist each other, and I think could potentially go off together. I wish there was a better Brooklyn guy that I'm super interested in as kind of the run back. Hey, maybe it could be Brook Lopez, go to a cheaper option that not many are going to use.
All right, all in on the Brooklyn guards. Hit the like button. NBA 15 is the code. DC will stay with you. Moving into the 8 p.m. Eastern time slot. Sacramento, once again, playing the Rockets in Houston. Sacramento favored by 2.5. These two teams played the other night. For Houston, Tari Eason remains out. And for Sacramento, De'Aaron Fox and Trey Lyles remain out. There were a lot of players in this matchup the other night who had really, really good games. Fred VanVleet, Jabari Smith. On the other side, Domantas Sabonis, kind of a letdown game. Malik Monk was the guy who did, I guess, the best in this matchup for the Kings. Kings ultimately losing that game. What do you see here, Sacramento at Houston?
Yeah, I feel like I should like the Sacramento side maybe a little bit more than I do, right? Like anytime you take the team's star point guard off the team, you usually see a lot of value emerge. Like Malik Monk seems solid to me at 5,700, but you're still probably only looking at 25 to 28 minutes. I guess a little bit of a bump for Kevin Huerter, but he's been really inconsistent. I don't like Davion Mitchell, obviously the direct starting replacement for Fox. I don't really have interest there. I do think Sabonis makes some sense. I know a little bit of a disappointing game last time out, but it certainly does run through Sabonis with Fox out. So I do think Sabonis gets the bump, maybe bounces back from a little bit of a slow game and has the big game in this one. That would make sense to me. So, Sabonis, Monk on the Sacramento side. Houston side, Sengun's been solid. Price creeping up there a little bit. Fred VanVleet, he still makes me nervous. Obviously, though, coming off the big game, he's capable of it. At least he showed that. I think he's fine at 7,500. I don't know. Maybe you or Bryce can talk me into this one, but I'm a little gun shy on this game overall.
Bryce, last season when De'Aaron Fox was out, it was Domantas Sabonis that you wanted. He hasn't shown that upside just yet. However, could be due for a bounce back. The one Rocket I didn't mention, I should have, Dillon Brooks, also a big game the other night. Looks like he's going to be very popular. Dillon Brooks as a popular play is one that we're always a little bit nervous about. He's looked maybe not more mature, maybe more consistent with the Rockets this season, maybe thinking that these young players are going to lean on him. What are your thoughts here, Sacramento and Houston?
I like the spot for the Rockets more than the Kings. Sabonis is really the guy you want in this scenario, and it's a really tough matchup. Houston's really good at protecting the rim. It turns it kind of into a shooting contest on the other side. It makes me like Mitchell and Monk some. I don't love them. I think they're much more viable if you don't get the Dallas value. We'll come to Reggie Jackson in a bit. But I'd prefer like him to like a Davion Mitchell type of play straight up. If we don't get the Dallas value, if you're looking to go cheaper at guard, I like the spot for Sengun, VanVleet, and Brooks. Brooks has been playing tons of minutes for how cheap he is, and he started off the season slow. Wasn't really sure what his role was going to be on this, but it looks to be pretty solid now. just based on what he's done the last couple games. So I definitely like that. Sengun and Van Vliet are just pretty cheap for the role you can expect it in, and it's a pretty good matchup for Houston here. So give me both of them at 8K and under.
All right, breaking news. Everybody's playing. Kyrie's playing. Luka's playing. SGA is playing. Welcome to week 3 of the NBA, everybody. Hit the like button. We're trying to get to DC. What's the number we need to get to likes? We've only got like 3 games left.
We got almost 450 watching.
We got 114 now, which is absolutely disgusting.
We got to hit 200 likes. I'm sorry. We got to ramp it up. We were asking for a lot. 200 likes on the show.
All right, 200 is actually fairly generous. Bryce, we'll stick with you. We'll move on. Boston heading into Minnesota. Boston favored by just 2.5 right now, 221.5. Total for the Celtics. Kristaps Porzingis, a midday downgrade. He fumbled his contact lens or something else with his eye. His eye is bothering him. Neemias Quetta is going to be out for the Celtics, as is Derek White. O'Shea Brissett is questionable as well. Porzingis officially questionable, hasn't been ruled out yet. No injury information for the Timberwolves. They are fully healthy. What are your thoughts here?
I mean, if Porzingis sits, Horford's going to be absolute chalk at 4,800. So, monitor that situation. I would lean towards more of a weight stance in GPP if he sits and kind of go towards like a Goga type of play. But it's hard not to like Horford here, like in cash games. I like Drew once again. He finally showed that he has the upside on this team last game. You like to see it. And without Derek White, I think his minutes ceiling is somewhat high in the scenario. Boston's just kind of a tough team with how many mouths they have to feed. I always like Tatum. Jaylen Brown can always get there. They're not priority plays for me. They're like secondary spend ups. Prefer Anthony Davis to like a Jason Tatum type of play. But as I said, I like to try and rotate the studs to some extent. If you're looking at the Timberwolves side of the ball, no one's going to project well here. It's not a great matchup for Anthony Edwards, but he's one of the elite players in the NBA. I think he's a really solid tournament play here at 8,900. Don't really love anything else on this side of the ball. Don't have tons of interest in Towns personally, and the secondary players are kind of whatever to me. Gobert is Gobert. He needs to like run into like a massive rebounding game to give you the upside that you're looking for on this slate. I don't think he's like the worst play at 6,600, but as we said, center's super deep today, so he's not a priority for me by any means.
All right, DC, Boston heading into Minneapolis. One guy I'll mention here, Jaylen Brown, under 8K, 7,900. He did take 22 shots last game. Last couple of games, he's taken 37 shots. He's only hit 14 of them. It's only a matter of time before he starts knocking those down. That price, to me, appears to be too cheap when you factor in that Derek White is out. If he's taking 20 minutes against the Timberwolves, 20 shots, excuse me, if he's taking 20 shots against the Timberwolves, then I kind of like him here. What are your thoughts, Boston in Minnesota?
Yeah, Boston just seems like a team where you have to be like almost extra price sensitive, right? You got to kind of monitor Tatum, Brown, where their prices are at, and kind of buy low when they get there. Do you think Jaylen Brown, 7,900? Of course, you take into account ownership there too, right? You want low price, low ownership with these Boston guys. You should get it, I think, for the most part with Jaylen Brown. So I do think he's a fun play. And then obviously the big thing to monitor is the Porzingis news. Like, if he's out, Al Horford, I think, is a stone lock to enter the starting lineup for the Celtics. They don't really have anybody else. And when you consider the Wolves are playing like two centers out there a lot of the time. They start the game with Rudy Gobert and Cat, and then Naz Reid comes in, right? And they often have two of those guys on the court. Tatum is kind of a little bit undersized in this matchup against Towns anyway. And so if you take Porzingis out, I think Al Horford has to, has to go out there and give him, especially if it's just a 1-game absence for Porzingis, like it seems like maybe it would be. Yeah, I think Al Horford can go out there for 1 game and play close to 35 minutes if they need him to, which I think they might on the road here against Minnesota. So it would seem like an amazing spot for Al Horford. I know he'd be chalky, but if we don't get the Porzingis news, this game doesn't – there's, what, five or six games but they'll lock before this one. There will be quite a few people that get frozen out from Al Horford. Obviously, he can play power forward center, so you'd probably be able to get to him. But I guess my point, if Porzingis is out and that announcement happens after the early games start, I don't think Horford will get to as high of ownership as he should have in that scenario, say if it was, the first game of the night, something like that. So I'm kind of trying to build with a spot for Al Horford in most of my lineups.
So planning as if – go ahead.
Yeah, and then adjust from there, right? If Porzingis sits, I don't want to play Horford. I take him out. I adjust from there. Obviously, got to have a plan. Minnesota side, I'm kind of out on. Towns' price getting down there, 8,100, but I'm just not sure this is quite the matchup for him. So, yeah, biggest thing by far in this game for me is that Porzingis news.
You could, if you wanted to do that, I guess you could swap from him to Jabari Smith. Those games start at the same time, but then there's not a ton else. I guess even the New Orleans.
You almost need to have like a 2v2 plan, right? Something like that.
Right. Fair enough. All right. Kevin Falk is here. Kevin Falk, as always, has a comment and request. Now that we have the news, he would like to request a restart. I'd love to go back in time and correct a lot of things, Kevin. A lot of things in life, but unfortunately
we don't need to go back. I can address it's the Dallas situation, right? That's the big news.
That's right. Why don't you address the Dallas situation?
Because now I'm kind of with. I think you have the same approach to me, Bryce. Like, I'm just kind of not worried about Dallas. I'm not paying those prices for Luka or Kyrie against Orlando, and not going to play anybody else on Dallas either. So it's kind of a cross-off team for me, right? I think that's the right approach.
They're both priced to like where the other one would sit. So
yeah, exactly. So
it definitely not their auxiliary players for me, and I can't really spend that price. I think if I had to play one of the studs here, I mean, I'd play a little bit of Luka, but like I'd still be significantly under the field. So the game's a pretty much a fade to me. It's not a good matchup for them, regardless. Right. Orlando is a really good defensive team, and they play at such a snail's pace on the road. Orlando's at home, but I think it's, especially if you're playing 1 to 3 lineups, maybe even 1 to 20 lineups, I would just simply fade the Mavericks here. If you want exposure from the game, I think Goga's the best play in the game by a decent margin now.
222.5 total too, so not as if you're fading what's expecting to be a barn burner here. All right, let's see. We all talked about Boston at Minnesota, correct? Yes?
Yep.
Excellent. DC, will stick with you. Utah at Chicago. Chicago favored by 4.5, another 222.5 total for the Bulls. Caruso is probable. Ayo Dosunmu is questionable. Patrick Williams probable. No major injuries for Utah. Any interest here in anyone? Utah at Chicago. It does look like there have been price drops for many of the guys on the Chicago side.
Yeah, maybe the game with the least injury news or close to it on the slate. Looks like 2 healthy teams for the most part, at least in terms of kind of the star players. We still see kind of these mid 7K price tags for Levine, DeRozan, Vucevic. Feel like a broken record with Chicago, but when it's the 3 of them all playing, I think, and they're kind of priced the same, I think it's really close. Obviously, you can look at the individual matchups to help you decide. I think I'd lean Vucevic in this particular scenario, but I don't love any of those 3 guys and probably won't end up on much Chicago unless we get unexpected news. And really the same thing about Utah. I think this is maybe, along with Golden State and Detroit, a game that and I can kind of throw Dallas in there as well, teams that on a 12-game slate I feel pretty safe avoiding for the most part.
Steve Wallach, yes, Drew Holiday is in play. The guys talked about liking him, especially with Derek White out. Bryce, Utah at Chicago. $7,200 for DeRozan. He's been not very good most of the time this season, but that is about as low as we've seen his price get on DraftKings. Thoughts here on the Bulls and the Jazz?
DeRozan's going to be one of the higher owned players on the slate, I would think, at only 7,200. You know, as JT said, it's just a super attractive price for like a long-term good fantasy producer. You know, at some point, you know, players like him are like, it's going to be like a KD type of situation where they're just not going to show the ceiling they had like when they were younger guys that rely on like their mid-range jump shots. So, you know, I don't really have a take on it yet, whether he's like actually washed or not. You know, he's been awful this season. He does have one monster game. That was against Toronto. You know, it's not a bad spot for him, like positionally or like game pace wise. I would probably rank him price adjusted, him, then Vooch, then Levine for me. You know, Levine is just so scoring dependent. You know, I'd take a shot on someone like him on a DraftKings as opposed to a FanDuel. You know, it's just kind of hard for him to run into like a monster stock game on FanDuel. So he's not likely to bury you even if he drops like 40. I like all three of them. I think Kobe White is a solid play at 5,200. You know, Jazz are a decent matchup. You know, it's not like a amazing play or anything, but without the Dallas value, you know, you need to go cheap somewhere, and you know, 5K is not breaking the bank for him. Favorite player on the other side of the game here by a decent margin would be Jordan Clarkson. He's only 6K. You know, he's running the offense. It's kind of like a price type of thing, but you know, I'm willing to buy lower on Clarkson at 6K for the rest of the season in this role. I think John Call is one of the more consistent players on the slate. He's priced up to, you know, 6,100 as opposed to being like 5,100 like he was last week. So I don't love him as much as that. I kind of question his upside for the price, but he seems pretty safe to me.
Who was that price?
John Collins.
John Collins. Okay. Horford or Batazde, Bryce, JW1856. If you had to pick just one, they're both 4,700. Where do you lean?
I'd lean Goga. I think he has a monster ceiling in this spot. And, you know, if you don't get the Porzingis news breaking your way, it's definitely Goga. If you get the Porzingis news breaking your way, it's super close. So if you don't have the news, I'd go Goga.
All right. And then Gary is in here. Our guy, Gary, he's asking if we're ignoring Detroit. I think before the Ivy news broke, you guys had said that it was maybe Thompson and maybe a little bit of Cunningham. Now that that news has broken, we'll go back to Brandon McMahon's point earlier. He said he's locking Marcus Sasser in 150. Does this increase your interest in any of those guards on the Detroit side? Sasser, Cade Cunningham, also Thompson, technically a forward-ish type. What are your thoughts here?
I don't mind Sasser. You know, he's not a lock button play for me or anything, but you know, if I was playing 150, I'd probably have like 15 to 20%. I didn't max it tonight, so I'd have to, you know, I haven't ran my stuff yet. It's just super hard to max if you're actually going to a game, which is why I never go to games. But you know, you got to see Wemby for the first time.
It's very smart to not max when you go to a game because people have done that who are on this show. I won't name names, me, DC. So it's good. But anyway, all right, DC, thoughts on Marcus Sasser, Thompson, Cade Cunningham? BMAX says we have no balls. What can I say?
Here's the difference between me and Bryce and why Bryce is smarter than me. I'm more likely to max if I'm going to the game. Bryce is less likely. There's
150 game stacks.
Let me write down DC's leaks. There's one. Don't stop maxing when you're going to the games. Yeah, of course, the news for Detroit. You know, it's got to change things a little bit. I got to dig into Sasser a little bit more, honestly. Like playing just shooting percentage wise, way above his head these last two games. 4 of 6 from 3, 5 of 8 from 3. You know, you give him normal shooting games in those two, and is scoring in the low 20s instead of the low 30s. And I'm not sure everyone would have the same enthusiasm for him if he had average shooting games in the last two nights. So I'm not saying I'm not going to play him, but yeah, I'll have to dig further into him, try to figure out what his role. But the minutes, yeah, they're obviously getting pretty thin with all the guys they're missing at this point. So I will need to revisit Detroit. Regardless, though, it does remain a pretty tough matchup for them, regardless of where you come out with the minutes and the talent level of these guys.
It is what I'll say for Sasser. You're right. I mean, you in your polite diplomatic way, which no one's ever said about you before, but in your polite diplomatic way, you kind of said you think it's a little bit of a chase, given his excellent shooting. What I will say on the plus side is it is a back-to-back, and therefore some of those guys, especially early in the season, some of those guys, other rookies, Thompson, what have you, no Ivy. Now, of course, we'll see what happens with Alec Burks, right? I think that's important news too. If Burks is out too, then yes, he becomes a much, much better play. But second night of a back-to-back, maybe there's even a few extra minutes for Marcus Sasser, and he gets upwards of 30. Now you're talking 4,400 for 30 minutes. All right, DC, talk to us about Utah and Chicago. I think you already talked to us about Utah and Chicago. Is that correct?
Pretty much off that game. Yep.
Excellent. All right. Bryce, we will go back and stick with you. The last game of the night, New Orleans Pelicans head into Denver. The news here, mostly on the Denver side, Nikola Jokic has been upgraded to probable. Jamal Murray is going to be out. You've already mentioned interest in Reggie Jackson. On the New Orleans side, pretty much a fully healthy team minus Jose Alvarado and Najee Marshall. What are your thoughts here? Early on, looking like Jokic was only going to be 12% owned. Now, I don't even know if it'll be that high because it's going to be a struggle to find the value to be able to get to him.
There's really not a lot of value for a 12-game slate when you look at it. And like a lot of that value is at center. So that's going to take even more ownership away from Jokic. Reggie Jackson, to me, is an amazing play on FanDuel. He's only 4,200. You can see him. He's not like allergic to stocks. Like he can easily get into like a big block or steal game here, starting for Jamal Murray. I think on FanDuel, he's one of the better plays at 4,200. On DraftKings, I'm much more hesitant to play him at 5,500. If you're looking at the rest of the game, I mean, little tough. CJ McCollum's out, but it's not a great matchup for Ingram or Zion. I think Dyson Daniels is viable as salary relief option on the slate without the Dallas guys. I had him highlighted before. We thought those guys might sit, so he's definitely going to be a buy for me today. I don't mind Aaron Gordon. 6,600 is just a nice price tag, and guarding someone like Zion, it seems like a good spot for Aaron Gordon to see like an increased like minute rotation here. If you're trying to micro pick the matchups here. But yeah, I mean, best play for me here in this game is Reggie Jackson on FanDuel.
All right, DC, thoughts on the Pelicans and the Nuggets. And then we will go back to a game that I skipped over. I don't think it's going to take us very long to talk about it. The Hawks and the Thunder. I think there's only a couple of mid-range plays there. DC, before you talk about New Orleans at Denver, hit the like button, people. Keldon Johnson on track to play. RJ Barrett's going to play. Duncan Robinson and Jimmy Butler are also going to play. So none of the questionable players so far have sat. So take that under advisement when you're thinking about saving a spot for Al Horford later. It is a midday eye issue. Go on, DC.
Real quick on Atlanta OKC. SGA in. I think he was listed out or doubtful to begin the day.
Yep.
Still a 243 total, highest by far on this slate. So I wouldn't get completely off this game, but it becomes OKC goes from one of the best teams to target to, it's kind of a little bit thin searching for value with SGA back in there. Obviously, most of the Hawks healthy as well. So, yeah, I mean, NBA is kind of one of those sports. It's not necessarily like the others where it's, the highest total on the game. You still need like the value, right, in NBA. So I don't think you have to go to Hawks, OKC. I'm not planning to have a whole ton of that game myself. Back to New Orleans, Denver, I think this is one of the best games of the night. Obviously, no Jamal Murray. We do have a decent sample size of Jokic of how guys play around Jokic without Jamal Murray. He's obviously missed a ton of time over the last 3 years, and the team hasn't changed that much, right? And it doesn't change that much when you play through Jokic. Like, they do that even when Jamal Murray is in there. And the nice part about playing Jokic's teammates with them, like, Jokic doesn't even have to score that many points to go off, because he can get 15 assists, 15 rebounds. He only needs 15 points, and all of a sudden he's there, and he can bring guys with him. Aaron Gordon is my favorite player to pair Jokic with, or even playing by himself. I don't think Zion, coming off, obviously hasn't played that much in the last couple of years. The altitude in Denver, and a guy like Gordon who's used to it, who can get out and run, a really star athlete, I think Denver could roll in this game. I think they're going to get out on the break, obviously led by Jokic. I like Gordon. MPJ, I think, is going to be guarded by Herb Jones, who's one of the better on-ball defenders in the league. I think that's a little problematic for Michael Porter, but I do like him otherwise. Reggie Jackson, I think, is good. Even like a guy like KCP, really, his usage goes up quite a bit with Jamal Murray off the court. And then on the other side, no CJ McCollum. I think Dyson Daniels, one of the better values. Ingram looks good to me. And then Zion is the one I'm not playing at 8,800 with the minutes limit and going up against Aaron Gordon and at altitude. No thanks there. So I do feel relatively comfortable fading him, which just makes me like the rest of the Pelicans more, right? Specifically Daniels, Ingram, and then Hawkins, I think 4,600, I think is a pretty good value play as well. I think this one is a good one for a game stack. If you got overtime in this one, I think there's a pretty good chance you could get, your 7 guys playing in it. If you had Jokic, Aaron Gordon, Reggie Jackson, Ingram, Dyson, Hawkins, right? Those guys could very good chance to be out there to close this game. So I do like the correlation game stack in this one quite a bit.
A true late night hammer. Of course, Reggie Jackson isn't going to guard anybody. DC, of course, our guy would know all about the altitude and its effects on the body. The hiking aficionado can't imagine how wilted Zion is going to be in this game this evening, having to take that.
Is that a big concern, Zion's conditioning in the altitude? It's got to be, right?
I mean, it's going to be interesting to watch Zion try and run around, because he hasn't been all that athletic and graceful running around at sea level, below sea level.
That's what I'm saying. I think it would make sense for me for Aaron Gordon to run circles around him in this individual matchup, I think.
No doubt. This has also been a very good matchup historically for Joker. You're looking at almost a guaranteed 65, and with upside, especially if the game stays close. We're not getting the likes, DC, and Uncle T's in Discord, and he says we should just put the plays of the day in Discord. We're not above that. If we don't get to 200, you've got a couple of minutes here. Bryce is going to give his thoughts on the Hawks at the Thunder, and then we're going to be done. And if we're not at 200, it might just be time to say night-night, and we'll see the members in Discord. Bryce, what do you got here? The Hawks at the Thunder.
This is one of my favorite GPP spots, actually. I don't think anyone's going to play SGA, and in this good of a game environment, even at 10-4, I like SGA in tournaments, period, like on a nightly basis. He always goes under-owned to me, like with all the other big names around him. And, if you want to go someone like Ilga, this is like a very contrarian, good spend up at guard, I think. Like Halliburton's going to draw a lot more ownership than SGA. And, I really like the spot for both him and Trae Young. Trae Young's only 8,800 on FanDuel. I think he's a solid play there. It kind of doesn't love his game doesn't love the scoring system, but I think he's too cheap there. I think Jalen Johnson's a very solid play. So those are kind of where I'm going to gravitate here. But it's kind of SGA for me. The Thunder guys are priced up a bit outside of him, because they've been playing without him. So it's kind of him and Trae Young for me here.
I'm seeing SGA at like 2 or 3% ownership. In a game with a 241 total. I mean, he just
you play 10 to 15% and you're 10x the field on.
That's what I'm saying. You don't have to go crazy with it, but he has to be a good play at 2% ownership. He just has to be.
Yeah, 100%.
Probably not a coincidence that SGA got himself into the lineup for this game either. Going up against Trae Young, going up against DeJounte Murray. You could see these guards maybe Trae and SGA going back and forth. And that is, sorry, Quinn. Quinn is excited by your dog, Bryce.
Yeah, some of my friends got here. They're doing the game in a bit. So
I'm just saying that's a pretty good dog bark for SGA on the SGA.
Yeah,
might have to,
that gives you a little something.
SGA might have to be the core play. He might have to be the play of the day.
An SGA Trae correlation. DeAndre Hunter coming off of a down game. He might be a pivot to Jalen Johnson, who's coming off an absolute ceiling game. Going to be one of the higher owned plays on the slate. Was going to be one of the higher owned plays on the slate with the Dallas value. Now, without it, I think he's even going to be higher owned. 185, people. I'll let DC make the call. DC, I've got the outro ready. I'm ready to close this down. What are your thoughts? Plays of the day or not? I don't want to start the week with bad mojo, but in a way, the mojo was bad by the people watching. I mean, I've got my Los Bravos shirt on. What do you say, DC? We're going in the Discord with the plays of the day or on the show?
Hit the like button, people. It's not too late. Do us a favor. I don't really understand why people don't hit the like button, to be honest.
I hit it. I hit it. You only have to get 199, right?
Yeah,
DC, you hit it. You actually only have to get 197. We all hit the like button. We're at 190. DC, do you think the people are going to get there?
They're going to get there. We're going to do the plays of the day. We'll do them quick. We know Bryce is itching to get to that Pacers game.
Exactly. Bryce, hit it up. What is your play of the day? Do you have a name for the play of the day yet?
I don't know, Schlong shooters or something.
Schlong shooter of the day. Fantastic.
Came up with that on the spot. We'll go with Tyrese Halliburton.
Halliburton.
All bias aside, if you don't want the total bias, like play the home guy and get to root for him, I really like Cam Thomas. I think it's a great spot for him. Me and DC really liked him on the show here, and talking him up, it only reinforced my belief in him today. So we'll go with co-plays of the day.
Absolutely. The Schlong shooter is Tyrese Halliburton. Love it. I will go to save DC for last, the Eiffel Tower play of the day. By the way, one of the most searched sex descriptions is the Eiffel Tower. I read that in the news over the weekend. I'm going to go to Boston. I'm going to go to a guy I said was underpriced, Jaylen Brown, 7,900 on DraftKings. Just too cheap for a guy that's taking 20 shots against this Minnesota defense. You've already got Derek White out, especially if you get Porzingis out. I really like Jaylen Brown here to go for 60 fantasy points tonight. DC, the Mom's Basement play of the day.
Yeah, we're going to go with Tyrese squared. I'll double up with Bryce. He's on Halliburton. I'll throw Maxey into the group. I do think there's a few of these guards, Halliburton, Maxey. We talked about SGA. You can get them very low owned. They've got, in my opinion, big upside each and every night, especially with all these good matchups that they have. Tyrese Maxey, the Snyder Soldier Mom's Basement play of the day.
Outstanding. Tyrese, Halliburton, and Maxey, Jaylen Brown. That's it. Run pure tonight. Bryce, enjoy the game. DC, we will see you on Friday for the Hardwood. Enjoy the week.